Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and from the beginning of Campaign 3, or at least from the beginning that it's been announced, they've been saying to expect the unexpected, that things will be different this time around. And for me, it hasn't felt terribly different, so I've gone back over the last 24 episodes, and I decided to figure out and pick out things that have been different from Campaign, 1 and 2 to this one, because they really harped on that. Expect the unexpected. This will be different, blah, blah, blah. So I really want to kind of single out a few things that I've kind of thought of or that I pulled from certain episodes and talk about what makes that specific thing different from previous campaigns. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to talk about is how everyone came in at different times. So in Campaign 1, they all came in together with the exception of Pike, and in Campaign 2, it was right at the beginning of the episode where they were kind of separate for about 10-15 minutes, and then immediately, bam, the group came together and we were off for Campaign 2. This campaign has done something totally different at the beginning. It had 3 different groups. No, 4 different groups. There was Laudna and Imogen, FCG and Ashton, the EXU crew, and Bertrand Bell. And if you want to include a 5th, technically Chetney was running around at the same time as well. So we had separate groups at the beginning of this campaign, and it was an hour and a half, I think, roughly, maybe even 2 hours before they fully came together to fight Furniture. That was when they finally all came together as a group, if you want to exclude Chetney. They finally came together as a group in episode 8, if you want to include Chetney. So this was a totally different experience from going from Caleb and Not at the inn in their room to going downstairs and running into Ford, Bo, and Jester, and then seconds later Yasha and Molly. And completely different from the whole Vox Machina group just arriving at Craghammer together. So totally different vibe from the beginning. We got to see separate people doing separate things, and at the beginning of a campaign, there was only 2 people sitting at the table with Matt, which was also rather different and rather unique to this campaign. Maybe they do it again for the next campaign, if there is another campaign. I don't know. But this is certainly something that is set the opener for the campaign completely different from the others. And another thing from the beginning, there was a guest who came in and sort of, I don't want to say took a spot from somebody because they didn't, technically, but they were sitting in a seat that we did not expect Robbie to be sitting in. That was Travis's seat during the beginning before they hit the intro, and then when Robbie got called in with Liam and Ashley and he sat where Travis was sitting at the beginning, was kind of alarming. It was different, and it was interesting that there was a different person that came in, and it meant that Travis would be showing up by himself because that was the 3rd group to be introduced at the beginning. It went Laudna, Imogen, FCG, Ashton, and then EXU showed up. So it was really weird that Travis wasn't there yet, and we had to wait for a while for Travis. But then Robbie was also there, which was a totally different dynamic. It meant there was going to be 8 players from the beginning of this campaign, which, like the others, is totally different because there was 7 for Campaign 2, and at the beginning there was 6 for Vox Machina because Pike wasn't there, because Ashley wasn't there. So it was really nice and interesting to see a full, even table. It was really cool, and it added a totally new dynamic because, for me at least, I felt like eventually he was going to leave. I didn't think he had joined the cast, but he did linger around long enough for the fan base to believe he had joined the cast. And it was, like I said, a totally different dynamic because he was a different player than we had seen from, the previous 2 campaigns. Robbie was a fresh face to lots of people, and he was a new player in D&D. His first game, I believe, was EXU. So then coming right into Critical Role Campaign 3 was interesting. And he lasted for, I believe, 14 or 13 episodes, which is longer than any other guest at one time. I believe there have been guests who have lasted a long time in different, sort of showings. But he had lasted forever as Dorian. And he was there for so long that a lot of people thought he had joined the cast. There was people even saying that he had just outright replaced Travis for this campaign for some reason, which I always felt was kind of goofy. But Travis had been missing for a handful of episodes at the time, and Robbie had been there the whole time. And then when Travis showed back up, Robbie was still there. And it was really cool to see someone different from the off, which is another thing that campaign 2 and 3, or sorry, 2 and 1 didn't have. Campaign 3 had this by itself. And now we're moving on to our second guest, and maybe that guest will be around for 10 to 15 episodes as well, which would be another really interesting thing to see. And the third thing I'm going to discuss is a main cast member introduced a character specifically to be killed off and to sort of hold off the introduction of their real character. That's completely new. First of all, telling a DM, I want to kill my character, I don't think that's happened in Critical Role. It's not totally uncommon to hear that come out of a player in a regular D&D game because they get bored of the class, they get bored of the character, or whatever. But in Critical Role, where they make these extensively long backstories that are interwoven with the world, to go through all that effort and then to be bored of the character isn't something that's happened before. I don't think Liam went to Matt and said, I want you to kill Vax. I don't think, Talzin said, I want you to kill Mollymock. I don't think he said that about Percy either, or Sam about Scanlan, or any other people who have had characters die on them in Critical Role. They've never gone to Matt and say, I want this character to die. And Travis did. Travis went to Matt and said, I want to introduce this character because I want to hold off on introducing my real character, but I want you to kill this character off. I don't want him to linger around once my real character shows up. And Matt did an expertly, good DM way of doing it. He killed him off, which put a reason to this group who seemed like after what they were doing, they could go separate ways. They made sure this group stayed together. And that's what I thought was really good about this whole killing off a player character. And it was a character who we have seen before. And it was very interesting to see Bertrand Bell, a character introduced with the sole reason of holding off for Chetney, being killed off because he was there for rescuing Grog and getting out of the realm of Pandemonium. So it was really cool to see him back as the older version of himself just to be killed off, which most fans probably figured he was going to be killed off. I did. I thought right from the beginning that he was going to be a tool to keep the group together, which is what he ended up being. So it was really interesting that the DM and the player did a sort of cooperative thing for storytelling like this. And granted, that's what all D&D is cooperative storytelling, but this was a lot more planned. A lot of D&D stuff is whatever happens, happens, but it's all cooperative anyway. This was, hey Matt, I want to die. I want my character to die. And I thought that was really cool. And, holding off for another player character is also something that's never happened before. No one has ever, introduced a character to have them leave just to introduce another character. Granted, the two haven't seemed to connected quite yet in Campaign 3, but it could still happen where, the two of them, ran into each other and they butted heads and Chetney went one way and Bertrand went the other way. And that's why Chetney didn't show up with Bertrand. Maybe. Who knows? I'm reading a little too far into it now. But I think it's interesting that this happened. This player death to introduce another player character later. I thought that was really interesting. And again, wholly unique to have someone say to the DM of Critical Role that I want my player to die. Or my character to die. And this one is something that I've harped on about a few times. And that is players were allowed to reference previous campaigns this time around for this campaign. Unlike previous campaigns, they avoided it. Campaign 1 had nothing to reference and Campaign 2 had all of Campaign 1 to reference, but they just avoided that idea like the plague. Matt would introduce characters that we've seen from Campaign 1 sporadically, but for the most part, they weren't. They didn't have any sort of connection with the exception of Artagan. But that was a completely different character from the Artagan we saw in Campaign 1. Campaign 2's Artagan was 25 years older is in quotes, and he was different. He wasn't as maniacal and evil where, the only way I was going to help you guys defeat Vecna was if I could kill Vax and you opened a door for me. This was a character who actually cared about Jester. So this whole reference of Campaign 1 and Campaign 3 is something that's totally different from something we saw in Campaign 2. This is direct relationships here. Orym was a guard of Keyleth from the town of Zethra, or the city of Zethra. He was there, and he has other connections to other characters like Derek. And with straight up Laudna. Straight up Laudna. How else can I put it? She is only alive because of Delilah. And she was hanging from the fucking sun tree in Campaign 1. And she was dressed up as... I believe she was dressed up as... Vex. I had a brain fart for a minute. She was dressed up as Vex, which is totally cool. And she has Delilah speaking in her head. And now, even with Fern, she's also referencing Campaign 2 a little with Eeyore, saying her parents potentially went there, and now that's where they are, and they're missing. So, with a roundabout way, because I don't want to harp on this too long, referencing previous campaigns is something they've been building toward from starting this series. And they're now at the point where they can finally do it without it feeling too forced, because only 2 or 3 players are doing it. And it feels natural at this point. It's been, I believe, 36-ish years since Vox Machina, or maybe a little bit less. And yeah, it's totally something that they should be allowed to do at this point. So, yeah. Referencing stuff now. That's cool. I'm okay with it as long as it doesn't go much further than what we have. 3 characters is enough to reference things. And if they start having Ashton be super connected to the Kryn Dynasty, that might take it a little bit too overboard for me, because that'll be over 50% of the cast is referencing stuff now. But as far as Ashton goes, it's literally just the whole chaos or possibility thing, and that's not necessarily something that has to be tied to Campaign 2. So right now, referencing stuff to me is okay. And I hope it's okay for all you too, because I don't think it's going anywhere, because this campaign, they were given the go-ahead. And to me, this is the thing that when Marisha said during the State of the Role, where is Critical Role Campaign 3, this is what I think she was talking about. The whole, we're allowed to reference previous campaigns now, which is something that they didn't do for Campaign 2. And it was something that I think a lot of fans wanted to see, and a lot of fans don't. But I do think that this is what she was talking about, specifically for her character, because she obviously had her character in her head already. She was obviously playing the character at this point by how it seems they were recording things at the time. Maybe they were already playing the character. Maybe they had already done their session zeros as these characters. So in her head, that was something that was going to set this campaign completely different from the rest. And it has. Referencing previous campaigns and previous continuity is super unique to this campaign, especially as far as character backstories. So it's new to this campaign as well. And the last thing, this is more of a joke than anything else, Ashley has been there for 95% of the show. Thank fuck Blind Spot is over. Seriously, this is it. This is the last one that I could really think of, and honestly, I fucking love it. I love that Ashley's here. I love how fucking chaotic Fern is. I just love seeing her at the table, and I think she has a fucking mastery over this character compared to her previous ones, because she's been able to play it more, and I love seeing her there. Fern is a chaotic, fun ball of mess, and I love it, and I can't wait for her to be there more. Fuck you, COVID, for taking her away for a week, and thank God for the internet so we can now have her on a Skype call if we have to. If we have to. Fucking don't ever do that again. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. So there you have it. All of the things that are different about Campaign 3 to the other campaigns that kind of sort of seal the deal about what they were talking about, in my opinion. These are the things, in my opinion, that are truly what set it apart. Because you could say the setting, it's more like Southwestern Asian inspired. But this isn't like the first time we've seen Marquette. So that's not truly wholly unique. But it is certainly a collaborative effort from a bunch of writers, which is different. But I kind of wanted to focus on more of the in-game stuff rather than the creation, I guess. I don't know. Sure, that's another one. This one is inspired by Southwest Asia, and there's more than one person writing it all. Because Matt wanted it to not be just his vision, because he's not from there. There's another one. I digress. Those are the things that make this campaign different. While it's not as much as I expected when they were hyping up the fact that this was going to be different, it is certainly quite a big deal that some of these are as different as they are. So, and I'm glad that it's not totally different and it's completely different vibe. It is still very much chaotic, Critical Role, and yeah, I love it. I love every second of it. I love these differences, so let's keep the rest the same and just focus on these differences. And let's keep that 95% for Ashley. Maybe it'll eventually be 100% when they reach episode 100 and she's been there the whole time. Who knows? Anyway, those are all the things that I thought of that were different for Campaign 3. Let me know of any other differences that you guys have seen that I missed or neglected. And yeah, that's been me. See you guys on Friday.